All of the individual stories were so good, and once you got hooked in, either by thinking what on earth has happened to the dead mother or the whole intrigue over the romance scam, there was a lot to captivate you.
It has this kind of Rashomon structure whereby you see the same events from different viewpoints. It sort of changes your idea of what's going on and who's responsible for what.
It's quite clever in the way it unravels everything, in that it doesn't show its hand completely at once, and it's kind of quite a fun guessing game that you can have with it at the same time. Hello everyone, joining Flixwatcher today we've got Patrick.
Hi there.
Claire.
Hello.
And as always, Kobe.
Yo.
And we're here to review Only the Animals. Thank you as always to the mighty people for their mighty tunes, and thanks to Ben from Rockwood Audio for his awesome editing skills.
Please do remember to write a review and rate us on Apple Podcasts and anywhere you can do where you listen to the podcast, because it really does help us.
And you can join in the conversation with us on Twitter
at FlixWatcherPod and on Instagram
at Flixwatcher. Hello film fans, welcome to this episode of Flixwatcher Podcast. Joining us remotely today we have Patrick and Claire. If you could please say hello and tell the listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you do, please.
Certainly. My name's Patrick Mills. I'm a bookseller based in Hackney in East London, and I specialise in crime and detective fiction. And the reason I know Claire, she's one of my best customers. We have a shared interest in those sorts of books. And my shop's in the basement of Pages of Hackney, which is an award-winning independent bookshop in Lower Clapton Road. And we've just reopened. If this is going out,
we're recording in April.
Yeah, so we should be up and running by the time this goes out. And so we've had a bit of a time of it during the lockdown, but hopefully that's all behind us. And looking forward to selling some books. My Instagram is @FieldsBooks. There's lots of stuff about secondhand books on there, and also an online Etsy shop which is also called Fields Books. So have a look on there for books you might want to buy or just to have a look at and check out and like.
Or if you're in the Hackney area, come and say hello when you're open as well. They're very friendly places, bookshops. They're always a good place to go and get recommendations. Like, you'll never leave empty-handed if you ask what's new or what can you recommend for someone who likes this or that author. It's a recommendation that you can't get on Amazon.
Yeah, that's true. And it's worth saying to support your local independent bookshop. We can also order online on Pages of Hackney. So check that out too, and we can deliver and have it sent in the post.
Nice. Thank you very much. And who are you?
I'm Claer Barrett. I'm a journalist at the Financial Times. I write a column in the FT Weekend newspaper every Saturday, and I am the presenter of the FT's Money Clinic podcast, which helps people solve their real-life financial problems, whether that's paying down credit card debt or finding out the best way of saving up for a deposit for your first home, or more esoteric things like green finance and investing. We do lots about investing, including on stuff for people who are doing it for the first time. The one thing you won't hear on my podcast is jargon. It's very much aimed at normal people. I think that there is far too much needless complication in the world of finance, so that they can sell us a solution of explaining it to us. So I'm all about people doing it themselves, but doing it well, with proper guidance from experts, and you can find that wherever you get your podcasts.
I imagine this past year has been quite it's been strange for everyone, but in terms of finances, people have been struggling, but then also some people who have been actually doing quite well. So it's
you're absolutely right, Kobe. It's just this huge divide with people like me, happily, who've been working from home. I've never worked harder in my life. I don't have to pay money to commute. I can't spend money on all the things I normally like doing, like going on holiday or going out to restaurants. So, like many people, I'm sitting on higher levels of cash savings at the moment. £180 billion worth, the Bank of England reckons, is sitting there in people's bank accounts. Whether that will be spent now that lockdown has been unleashed, who will tell? But then on the flip side, you've got millions of small businesses who haven't had any kind of state-backed support. You've got millions of people on furlough, millions of people unemployed. So it's very much a story of two halves, unfortunately.
Well, let's make sure we get to your column and the podcast there to get advice for both sides of the coin for people there.
About lots of adult related things, finance things that we all tend to put off far too late in life, and then we're told, you should have thought about this earlier. I think is the general advice. Terrified of finances. Yeah. Pensions, finance.
Well, Helen, I'm happy to have a one-to-one chat with you after the podcast. I see it as a personal challenge. I have a lot of colleagues, actually, at the Financial Times, if it makes you feel any better, who feel exactly the same and can't engage with the language, the rhetoric. They've just got like a mental block when it comes to dealing with it. And I say, well, let's sit down and let's work out a plan to tackle this. And we do it. And they all feel so much better afterwards.
Well, here talking about the opposite. Well, I don't know if it's the opposite of finance. It's your film, Patrick, Only the Animals. Can you tell us, first of all, why you chose it? And then, if you can, well, you have to do it within 60 seconds. Give us a synopsis.
Sure. So, Only the Animals, Sur les bêtes in French, was released in 2019, directed by Dominik Moll, who he directed a film back 20 years ago called Harry, something about Harry. It was big at Cannes, but it wasn't. He never really did much after that. And then this came out and was quite a big success. Well, an independent success, more in Europe. And so it's about a woman. This first image that you see is a young man riding a bicycle, obviously in an African city with a goat tied to his back. Then it cuts to this very rural location in the middle of nowhere in France, where a woman's gone missing in a snowstorm. So you're immediately thinking, what's going on there? What's the sort of connection? As it sort of unfolds, we realise there's a series of different characters who their lives are sort of intersecting. And the lady who's disappeared turns up, and then she's linked to these farmers who seem to not be getting on. So you think, you first of all, you think we're in sort of classic thriller territory, and it's someone's been murdered and they're going to find that. But as it goes on, it has this kind of Rashomon structure whereby you see the same events from different viewpoints. And it sort of changes your idea of what's going on and who's responsible for what. Another way of looking at it would be like a Russian doll structure, whereby you have one, you take out one, and there's another, and then there's another inside.
Why did you choose it?
I chose it because I really enjoyed the different approach to storytelling. It reminded me of another film that I know you've reviewed on here called Uncut Gems with Adam Sandler.
So it reminded you of Uncut Gems?
Well, it was more just the way that it was an unorthodox way of telling a story. So Uncut Gems was just so sort of, it was just, I saw some of the reviews that described it as it's almost like a new way of entertainment. It's a new mode of sort of cinema entertainment. And this, similarly, it had a different approach. It's quite unsettling, for one, like Uncut Gems was. But it's also just quite refreshing to see something done in a completely new way that you hadn't maybe seen before. To a certain extent, it was it's unprecedented. So that's what made it appeal to me.
Helen and Claire, had you seen this before, and what were your initial thoughts?
I hadn't seen it before. I'm not generally a fan of films with subtitles, I have to say, because you can't look at your phone while you're watching a film with subtitles, because you've got to really immerse yourself in it. But having said that, it was very, very easy to immerse myself in the plot of this film, and sort of like picking up all of the different narrative threads and, you know, where they overlapped, and how these very strange characters you wouldn't really throw together in a million years, you know, how their stories intertwined. And I thought it was great, and it's probably quite good for me to not look at my phone when I'm watching TV, frankly.
I'm sure that's the way the director intended. All directors intend you not to be playing on your phone.
I'm sure they did. I'd never heard of this before, so this was a new one for me, even though it came out fairly recently, 2019. I think I'd probably say if I was in the position for writing a pithy quote for the film poster, Fargo meets Amoris Perros kind of vibe. I don't quite know what I was expecting. I didn't really read much going into it, and I find it a lot funnier than I was expecting it to be. It's quite a dark humour film. I don't know if anyone else found it funny. I thought it was quite funny, and very surreal how everyone kind of gets caught up. And even though you sort of joked at the start of the conversation about it not being about finance and money, it is about money, and it's kind of like greed and money sets everything in motion. And was it Fisher, the scam?
Armand,
yeah,
played in it, yeah.
Being scammed for loads of money in the instance, then the series of events may not have been set in motion, which leads most people and a poor dog, it's a very sad moment, to meet their untimely end in a series of bizarre events, I think it's fair to say.
I hadn't heard of this before, and I love films that kind of do tell stories in an interesting way. And I remember how people's minds were blown with Pulp Fiction. It's like, whoa, hold on, this is told in 3 parts, and there's a kind of intertwining narrative. It reminds me of films like Irreversible as well, which is because the timeline isn't so clear. You have to be paying attention to see which story comes before when, and because some stories are more self-contained in a shorter time space, and other ones expand the whole kind of length of the film. And I found it really interesting that way. And some people more tragic. Was there any non-tragic story in there? I think the first lady, the wife of the farmer, was probably perhaps the least tragic storyline. And I like the way it did end. It did end on a kind of a laugh at the end, with Michel and the guy who was fishing, catfishing him as Armand, had a kind of laugh at the end on the computer screen. I just had a lot of fun with it. I thought it was really good fun, and I thought it was really interesting. I thought it was really compelling. And once I saw which way it was going, with peeling back the layers, as Patrick says, in the kind of Russian doll onion skin way, I was like, okay, so who's next? What story are they going to unpeel? And when I haven't rewatched it yet, but I remember seeing, like, when Amandine, I can't remember her real Nev character was, when she tried to hitchhike, and I was like, oh, it's those 2 characters, and then they sped away. And when you kind of realize, I was like, oh, we're going to see the other side of that. I'm really excited to see that. So yeah, it kept me really engaged all the way through. So I want more stories like this, and I can imagine that somewhere down the line there'll be an American version of this because people like Claire don't want to read subtitles.
I know, I'm such a Luddite, but I think, as a finance journalist, boringly, what I really liked about this film is that it exposed a massive problem, which is romance scams. And, you know, nearly £500 million last year in the UK alone was lost to various forms of internet banking scams, and like romance fraud is one of them. But that's just what's reported. And I know for a fact that many people who are taken in by romance scams, that, you know, they meet people online, as we see in this film. You know, this French farmer sitting there, he thinks he's talking to this really hot young French girl, but he's actually on the internet to a group of quite poor black guys in Africa who are kind of passing the laptop round pretending to be the lady because they have bought footage of her on the dark web. Now, this even has a name. It's called e-whoring. And a documentary came out on it on the BBC, of all places, last week, showing what a huge phenomenon this is becoming, where people's images are being, you know, taken and used without their consent, you know, by scammers to, you know, put them forward as, you know, some kind of catnip to.
I wasn't aware of any of any of this before. Claire told me about this prior to this recording, and she told me this. I was quite surprised that the extent that this actually goes on, that there's these people out there pretending to be other people, and so it definitely it shone a light on that, and it's something that maybe people aren't so aware of, because I certainly wasn't aware of the extent that this sort of fraud is perpetuated.
And
was
also,
was this one of the Storyville series? Was it?
It was on. It's on BBC Three, so I don't know if it is Storyville or not. But it's a former model who, when she was like 17 or 18, she did glamour model shots, and there are topless pictures of her circulating on the internet, and they've been used in all kinds of things. And because she doesn't own the photos or the rights to them, it's very, very hard for her to do anything about it. She's been incredibly brave in telling her story, and that's like another angle on the same story, but actually seeing the scammers themselves and why they are compelled to commit this type of crime. Now, that wasn't something that I was expecting to see, and I did feel that was a really interesting way into talking about this. And I also was very struck by how lonely all of the characters were in all 5 of those stories. Loneliness was very much at the heart of their problems, and of course it's loneliness that romance scammers are totally preying upon, and that is why these kinds of frauds have absolutely soared, unfortunately, during the pandemic, because more people want to believe that really fit person that they're talking to on the internet is real and is really into them.
I can imagine, like I say, I'm surprised that amount of scamming has been reported, because it's one of those things where if you find that you've been scammed, do you want to contact the police and say, yeah, I've been speaking to who I thought was a very attractive lady in her 20s and found out is a 70-year-old man in Indonesia.
I suppose that's in the film when the police in Ivory Coast call up Michel, the farmer, and say, do you want to press charges? And he says, no, I don't want to press, and bangs the phone down on them, which is possibly that's the sort of natural reaction for a lot of people. They don't want to believe it. They don't want to believe that they've been scammed, but B, they don't want to believe that what this love affair that they've imagined is just all sort of fantasy. So
I think there must be a fair amount of shame there as well. And if there are people who are in relationships, because one of the things I remember at the start was Michel, the guy who'd been caught up in the scam, telling his wife that, I need to spend some more of our money to do something. And at the time I thought that sounds a bit dodgy. And it was nice to see how that unfurled in one of the stories later on.
Basically, if anyone sends you a message on any kind of web-based platform and you don't know them, they're probably after money, and they're probably not who they say they are.
It's super easy to find an image, say it's me, and share it, and say
probably less likely that they're then going to turn up accidentally in your hometown. But
well, that's where the nice kind of twists happen, wasn't it?
I thought some of the coincidences were a bit forced. Some of it was a bit unbelievable, but it kind of got away with it because because of the way it was told and the sort of story it was a bit strange. It was a bit, the suspension of disbelief sort of worked there, and you could imagine she just randomly turned up in this guy's hometown. But the other thing I was going to say about it is if people are worried that they can't go and spend their holidays in France because of COVID or anything, they watch this, nobody would want to go and spend a holiday in France. They'd be quite happy in a caravan on the Isle of Wight after they're watching this one.
Yeah, I mean, forget a year in Provence. It's, particularly some of the opening scenes where you've got these two, kind of overweight, sweaty French farmers in their kind of ramshackle farms that are falling apart at the seams.
Like they haven't had a wash since sort of Bastille Day.
Well, I thought at the beginning, is this set in the 1970s? Because the interiors of the farmhouses were so kind of retro. And it was only when you see him on a computer allegedly doing the accounts, where he's actually talking to who he believes to be this fit French babe, that you think, oh, okay, we're not in the 1970s then. People do have mobile phones in this part of France. But yeah, it was... I'm sure if we had smelly vision, I think you would be switching it off. It looked pretty ripe.
What did you make of the character who's the second part of the story, who fell in love with a dead woman? In terms of kind of suspension of disbelief that you're talking about, Patrick, that was for me. It was like, this is a bit.
Well, I think much. he was supposed to have been. He was very close to his mother, and his mother had died, and so it sort of worked in that sense. I mean, it was a bit strange. And then he put on that. He played the tape, and so he put the hay bales together, and he had the tape recorder. And he played that very sort of cheesy song that came up again at the end, which I quite liked in a weird way. But it was, I think it was called "To a Par," like "You have gone, you have left." So it was all about that. So he's there with the dead bodies singing, and she's singing, "You have gone, you're not here anymore." It was a strange one. That I'd be interested to see how the rest of you felt about that.
Helen, what did you make of Joesph?
He was just a bit of a strange loner. Clearly, a bit of isolation had not been kind to him, and shot his dog. So, not my favourite character, unfortunately.
Oh, he did shoot his dog, didn't he?
Yeah. He shot his dog because the dog was going to uncover the romance.
Nor his dead lover.
Yeah. And also, I think that was where the way that ended really abruptly, that sequence, didn't it? Because he threw her down the hole and sat there and then jumped himself down. I was like, oh, hold on.
I was sitting there saying, he's going to jump, he's going to go, he's going to be next.
Oh, you thought it?
Yeah. And then he did. It was still quite shocking. And
Claire pointed out to me that you didn't hear him hit you didn't hear the sound. Yeah. It was just like, and it's like sort of, then
he's
it cut.
still falling now.
Oh, that's a bit freaky. That's a bit freaky.
I think that's when I realised that it was actually going to be quite playful and not particularly serious.
When they jumped into the hole, when he threw himself into the...
Because it's so absurd. It was like, okay, this is the French sense of humour coming through. This is going to be even wackier. It's going to go even further than...
I was also thinking, if this was in Britain and there was a sinkhole, health and safety gone mad, there would have been all, barbed wire fences around it and no access. And in France, just park your car and walk a few metres from the side of the road, and there's this convenient, dumping funnel for bodies.
Well, let's see what happens when the English language version of this is made, and if they do have the health and safety barriers up. Don't step this way, sinkhole. Yeah, I don't know. I was quite taken by this film. I was thinking we haven't had that many foreign language films on here, but we actually have. City of God was an early one that worked. I think I'm very happy to have a foreign language film on and watch them. It doesn't really bother me, but I think it just does set yourself up that you have to make sure you're paying attention, because you can't even lose focus slightly because you miss. Unless
you end up having to rewind and what did
exactly.
he say? What did he say? If you're checking your.
So I can understand why people aren't so keen on them if they want to zone out. But if you're happy to watch a film and be fully focused, then I think there's no reason why. I think you get a lot out of them. And I think this is something that would have been hard to get in the Hollywood system or the English, maybe in the British film system. I can imagine the person who wrote and directed In God's Own Country doing a similar kind of thing like this, set in the Yorkshire Dales, for example. But yeah, is there anything else, guys, you want to say before we head to the scores?
The other thing that in terms of films that it reminded me of, there's one 70s film called Le Boucher, The Butcher, by Claude Chabrol, which is about a serial killer in the middle of nowhere in France. But it used the sort of the landscape in a similar way to where this film is set, which is in the Massif Central, right in the sort of middle of France, but towards the south. And that, you know, we were talking about that strain, you know, that hole where it goes up in the mountains, and there's this, I think they're all extinct volcanoes, but I thought it was interesting that they used that landscape to, and it was pretty bleak and empty, and it sort of reflected some of the sort of loneliness, possibly that Claire was talking about, that all the characters seem to share.
I was wondering how they filmed it, because it looked like genuinely real snow, and the seasons did wax and wane. I mean, I could just they must have shot it over quite a long period of time, but in like sections when the weather seemed to suit. But I think the landscape of it was perfect. Should we get to scores?
Hello folks, I'm Sam.
And I'm Martin.
And every week for the last 5 years we've got together to talk about the musician Tom Waits.
He's a gravelly voiced singer that sounded like he doused his vocal cords in bourbon and set fire to them with a cigarette, and wrote such classic songs as Way Down in the Hole, Downtown Train, Jersey Girl.
He's also the gravelly-voiced actor from films such as The Ballad of Buster Scruggs and Seven Psychopaths, both of which coincidentally are on Netflix, and both of which Kobe and Helen have discussed here on Flixwatcher.
So make sure you check those episodes out, and when you have a little bit of a taste for the magic that is Tom Waits, why not head over to songbysongpodcast.com or search for Song by Song in your podcatcher of choice to listen to a little bit more about Tom Waits.
Let's head to the scores. All of the Flixwatcher scores are out of 5. You may have decimal places if you wish, and we'll start with you, please, Patrick, with your recommendability score.
So I really enjoyed this film. I thought it was, you know, as we said, it's kind of different way of making a film, different way of telling a story. So I'd probably give it 4.5 for that.
Claire?
I would match you with 4.5. I think that it's a really great film. I've actually recommended a couple of friends should watch it anyway, because let's face it, we're all busy looking for things to watch on Netflix that we haven't watched already during the past year. And it was something that I didn't know was there. But it is quite dark, and certainly trigger warnings if you don't like violence towards animals.
Helen?
Yeah, it's kind of a strange one. I kind of enjoyed being in the moment watching it, and then kind of I haven't really thought much about it since. So it's kind of, if you're kind of into this thing, you're probably going to really enjoy it. The kind of like structure for me didn't feel probably as exciting as it did for the first time that I watched Pulp Fiction. So it's more kind of the absurdity, I think, rather than the structure of the storytelling that I enjoyed the most, in that it all kind of stems from one bizarre incident and a series of bizarre coincidences. So I think I'll go for a 4. And the other films maybe I'd recommend ahead a bit, but still recommended.
Yeah, I'm going to go for a 4 here, just because I think it's lost points mainly because it's a foreign language film, and when you recommended that to people who, you know, are very intelligent and insightful, but it does seem to be, and as Bong Joon-ho said about Parasite, if you can get over that 1 inch high barrier, then it opens the world up to you. But still, there's so many people who are put off by the 1 inch high barrier for films, so it makes it a hard sell. But yeah, 4 I think is a fair representation. Patrick, repeat viewing score. Have you seen this before?
I have. I saw it quite recently on Netflix, and I watched it again ahead of the podcast just so that so it was fresh in my mind. So
was it a Netflix recommendation, or was it a Netflix punt on your part?
I think it was one of those ones where it says if
recommended for you. Was it one of those it suggested?
Yeah,
based on your viewing.
Because I watched. I mean, well, I've been watching a lot of Netflix anyway because of the lockdown and everything. But I do tend to watch a lot of French foreign language films. I really like them. Films having subtitles, that's a recommendation for me. That's not, it works the other way. But so I'd say repeat viewing, maybe, I think it's not one you needed to watch too many times. I think once you watch it, you've kind of got it. I don't think it gained too much from a second viewing. There wasn't much that I didn't pick up on. So I'd say 3 maybe.
Claire?
I would definitely watch it again just to sort of see how the stories stitch together. So if somebody I knew wanted to watch it, I'd definitely watch it with them. So I'd say 3.5.
Helen?
It's nearly 2 hours, which, if you know me, is quite a long time for me, especially if I've already seen it before. The subtitles things doesn't really put me off. I think I've watched so many films now that are with subtitles. They're all just the same. I don't know whether my brain minds reading them or not. I don't think that should put you off watching a film at all, ever. It can be a wonderful experience, always, she says. Am I going to watch it again? Probably not. 1.5.
I don't think I'll watch it again soon. I'll happily, maybe in 5 or 6 years, I might try and revisit it and stitch together and try and see if there's any kind of pieces that were hinted at in the earlier stories that pay out in the latter ones. But I don't think I'm going to watch it that often. So 2.5. Small screen score. Patrick.
Yeah, I mean, I think it worked. It worked fine for me watching at home. It's fairly compelling. It's like visually, I thought that it looked pretty good. So yeah, I'd give it a 3. Say 4.
Claire.
Yeah, I mean, I would go higher than that. I'd say 4.5. I think if I had paid to watch it at the cinema, I don't know. It is 2 hours, so I guess it is quite good value. But definitely, I think benefited from being able to hit the pause button, so I could look at my phone and not the subtitles for a couple of times.
I tend to just start looking at the phone and realise I need to rewind like 2 or 3 minutes to make sure I don't miss anything. Helen.
I just love that, Claire. That do you work out the value by the kind of the run length from the cinema to the price? Is that if you get value for money? I'm just loving how you would equate whether if it was a shorter version, would it not been?
Helen, I never buy anything unless it's a deal. I'm an absolute nightmare. I always get money off everything. Yes, it's just the way of life. I've always been like it.
I love that. I think I definitely would not have seen this at the cinema. It wouldn't have been kind of in my radar to have seen it. And I think it works fine on the home screen. I think it kind of felt a little bit like it could have been maybe like a 2-parter / 3-parter TV series. In fact, thinking about it, maybe they could have, had it been that, they could have maybe fleshed the characters out a little bit, because I kind of felt that we didn't really know them as well as we probably could have done, considering it was a 2-hour film. So maybe if they remade it, a 3-part American series is on the cards for it. But for small screen, a 5.
I think almost, I kind of like what you're saying there, Helen, but I think almost an hour long for each person. And that's the story. Over 5 episodes would be quite cool.
Pitch it now. Pitch it to Netflix. You're going to remake it.
I've got other things to pitch to Netflix. This isn't one of them. I've got, maybe it's down at the bottom. But yeah, I think I'm going to give it a 5. This is the kind of thing, if I'd heard about it on the grapevine, and it wouldn't have been the thing I'd go to the cinema for, but it'd certainly be like the, if I'm going to see, sometimes I'd go and see 2 or 3 films in one day, and it'd be one of the ones I'd go and see, but it wouldn't be, if I just had to see one film, it probably wouldn't be that film, if that makes sense. I'm happy to sit in the cinema, but and this would have been a cool thing to see there. So yeah, but otherwise, I think it was great at home. Engagement score.
So I suppose as a subtitle film, it might suffer from less engagement if you are checking your phone. But I mean, I found it pretty engaging in terms of I didn't feel that there wasn't too many distractions, and it's fairly compelling. So I'd give it 4.5.
Claire.
I'd even go higher on that. I'd say 4.7, just because all of the individual stories were so good. And once you got hooked in, either by thinking what on earth has happened to the dead mother, or, why is this middle-aged, quite sexy businesswoman getting it on with a waitress, or, the whole intrigue over the romance scam and how that all played out. There was a lot to captivate you, and, the subtitles didn't really matter.
Helen.
Yeah, I don't think anyone could start watching this and then not want to find out how a goat got involved. I think it's got in the way of its storytelling, it does quite well in feeding you just enough to keep you interested, but not quite telling the full story immediately. I think as it goes on, you once you see it from at least one other side, you can kind of see where it's going. But it's quite clever in the way it unravels everything, in that it doesn't show its hand completely at once, and it's kind of quite a fun guessing game that you can have with it at the same time. So I'm going to give it a 4.5 as well for engagement.
Yeah, it's going for a 4.5 there as well. I think it's, once you realise, once you see the start of Joesph's story, I think Joesph's the second story in this, and you see some of the part of the First Lady from Joesph's point of view, like, okay, right, I see what happens. And when you see the dead missing person in the snow, and you see it from that side, his side, I think you'd be hard not to be hooked into it. And you'd be hard not to be compelled and hard not to want to find out what happens, even if it's the next 5 minutes. And I think that's just really great storytelling. But the subtitles, I just feel that it wouldn't ever put me off watching a film, but it might put me off watching it at, when I'm tired or I'm lacking in concentration. But if I want to watch the film, I will 100% watch it. But it does mean you have to be engaged. So, anyway, 4.5. And that gives us an overall score of 4.01250, which is strong.
Sneaks into the fours. Very
and
good.
Even with a low repeat viewing score as well. So I think that's a stellar result. Thank you very much, Patrick, for watching it the first time and watching it again with us and suggesting it to everyone here to watch it. Can you and Claire sign off by telling us where we can find you online, and we'll say goodbye to the listeners.
So I'm on Fields Books on Etsy, which is where I sell books, but the bookstore that I work in, you can find it at pagesofhackney.co.uk, and also my Instagram is at Fields Books, so there's lots of stuff on there, so go on there and you can find more information.
Claire?
And you can listen to my podcast, Money Clinic, wherever you get your podcasts. We have a new episode comes out every week on Tuesdays. On Saturday, I have a column in the FT Weekend newspaper, and most weeknights you can hear me on LBC Radio with Eddie Mayer trying to decode some kind of financial stuff for people who are listening.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, guys. Thanks for joining us, and thanks to everyone who's listening.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Enjoyed this episode of Flixwatcher podcast? Why not leave us a 5-star review on iTunes? You can also follow us at FlixWatcherPod on Twitter, and we're at FlixWatcher on Instagram. Thanks as always to the mighty people for their mighty, mighty tunes, and Ben from Rockwood Audio for his awesome editing skills. If you're looking to get your podcast edited as sweet as this, get in touch with Ben, and that's Rockwood, ROKK Wood Audio. Tell them Flixwatcher sent you.
You just heard a Stripped Media production.